Hi, my name is Jonna Håkansson and I'm a PhD student at the Department of Pedagogical, Curricular and Professional Studies at University of Gothenburg. I am also one of the founders of GUCAS, University of Gothenburg's Network for Critical Animal Studies in the Anthropocene. And my presentation for today is titled Introducing Narratives of Animal Rights in Schools. Today I will present some work in progress starting from my PhD project, exploring possibilities for introducing critical animal pedagogies in formal education. And I will be focusing on what happens when animal rights activists and critical animal studies scholars, me in this case, enter classrooms and share narratives of personal transitioning to veganism and getting engaged with animal rights, as well as the narratives of non-human animals exploited and killed for food. I am considering the potential of these narratives to be part of changing future narratives of human-animal relations by addressing and resisting a narrative of non-human animals as existing for human use, and by pointing to more ethical and sustainable human-animal relations practiced in the here and now. Hence, this presentation also concerns the relationship between activism, education, and research. For those not familiar with critical animal pedagogies, it is in short about addressing the role of non-human animals within education and how education often is part of forming our relationships to other animals so that we become part of their exploitation. And it is about exploring alternative teaching practices that could enable new forms of human-animal relations, which I will focus on today. And the project is carried out as a collaborative project in which I work together with teachers and students, animal rights activists, and critical animal studies scholars, discussing, developing, and introducing critical animal pedagogies in 2 Swedish gymnasium schools. And during this presentation, I will draw upon data from the 2 first lessons of an 8-week-long critical animal pedagogies module with a social science class in year 2 in a gymnasium school with students in the approximate age of 16 to 17 years old. And inspired by Richard Twine, I will conceptualize me and animal rights activists as vegan killjoys. Applying the work of Sara Ahmed beyond an anthropocentric realm, Twine extends the figure of the feminist killjoy to also include vegans, hence the vegan killjoy. Ahmed takes the example of speaking up at a family dinner table, and Twine points to how this analogy might be even more relevant for vegans. In short, the feminist killjoy creates a bad atmosphere by pointing out inequalities or violence, and is by doing so being ascribed this atmosphere or even as being violent. In this sense, it is about being ascribed the figure of the feminist killjoy. But if this figure must be understood in relation to feminist critiques of happiness and how happiness justifies social norms as social goods. According to Ahmed, feminists do kill joy in the sense that they, or we, and I quote, disturb the fantasy that happiness can be found in certain places, end quote. And Twine acknowledges how veganism constitutes a challenge to the dominant affective community who celebrates the pleasure of consuming animals and questions the assumption of this shared happiness. By the mere presence of vegans, the omnivore is reminded of the violence implicit in their meal. Hence, the vegan becomes a killjoy, sometimes even without speaking up. And drawing upon Ahmed and Twine, an animal rights activist and/or a critical animal pedagogy educator occupies the position of a vegan killjoy in the sense that one resists the happiness order of animal exploitation in making visible and addressing the violence inherent in current human-animal relations. And according to Ahmed, and I quote, an activist archive is an unhappiness archive, one shaped by the struggles of those who are willing to struggle against happiness. We might redescribe the struggle in terms of those who are willing to be willful, An unhappiness archive is a willfulness archive. And following the work of Ahmed, a feminist killjoy becomes an affect alien in not feeling happiness in relation to the right things. By not following certain norms, they become visible, since being estranged from enables a consciousness of. Hence, feminist killjoys can engage in world-making projects, since this position can create the feelings of wonder, enabling learning to see the world as something that does not have to be. And that is a quote from Ahmed. This creates a particular powerful starting point for addressing and resisting exploitation and envisioning other possible futures. Together, me and an animal rights activist introduced critical animal studies, animal ethics and animal rights in the classroom. We also shared some of our journeys to veganism and getting involved with animal rights. For instance, the students encountered the narratives of a person learning about injustices, taking a stand and changing her everyday life choices and getting involved in activism, and the process of getting there in hearing the story of an animal rights activist. And following the work of Twine, and I quote, "Listening to vegans talk about narratives of transition locates the practice within ethical, political and relational complexity of everyday life, providing lived knowledge that might not emerge from abstract philosophical discussion." And this relates to narratives of non-human animals, since it creates a context for these narratives to be told, in mapping out a possible way of answering to them. The activist also introduced the notion of non-human animals embraced within the animal rights movement, approaching them as conscious, sentient beings with their own interests and needs, as opposed to how other animals are often seen as objects for human use. She stated that, and I quote, "We want to achieve a large change in society and achieve a more ethical view on animals and a more ethical world for everyone living here. And so, mapping out an alternative possible future, which she and others already largely practice in the present, can be described in terms of the world-making project of the vegan killjoy. The students were also invited to this world-making project by engaging in processes of envisioning societies of interspecies sustainability and discussing strategies to get there, trying out what this perspective would mean. And although the content of the lessons was prepared in advance, they were also shaped by what was put into motion in the classroom. And during the first lesson, one of the students asked if we were vegans, and I replied that we are. And this seemed to spark an interest, and the students asked for how long and what we eat. Yet another one asked if we miss eating meat, and then I told them I did not dislike the taste of meat, but one day I felt like I just couldn't eat it anymore, because I connected the meat on my plate to a once living being. And this correlates also with the activist when she previously told the students about how she went vegetarian and later vegan after watching a documentary about transports of non-human animals in the meat production. The process of reconnecting we described couldn't be understood in terms of, and I quote Twine here, a process of affective alienation from normative associations between food consumption and happiness. End quote. According to Twine, the vegan rejects commodity fetishism in rejecting food of animal origin by reimagining the animal and recalling the relational violence inherent in animal consumption. This is also in line with the work of Sally, who states that to be vegan is to refuse the end product the way it is presented to you, since you break it into its constituent parts. Hence, a piece of meat is no longer food, but a once living sentient being who has suffered. And such moments of refusal and realizations means a break in perception. And Sally, drawing upon Lear, considers it to be about suspending what one thinks one knows in order to, and I quote, see and know otherwise, end quote. Sally connects the practice of changing certain habits to giving up trying to know in an abstract way, and both of us acknowledge to the students that we in some sense did know about the conditions in animal factories, but at some point we experienced this knowledge differently, less abstract. Before, meat was food, but now it became a once living being that has died. And these moments when breakdowns occur along with sharing these narratives are crucial dimensions of the world-making project, part of being a vegan killjoy. Since its phenomenology enables one to explore how the familiar is that which is not revealed, the experience of vegans reveals the meat norm. In these moments, me and the activist were estranged from familiar eating practices which enabled a consciousness of these practices, creating a basis for addressing and resisting them. Hence, practices of veganism and animal rights entered closer proximity to the students, possibly bringing them forward as alternatives within reach, suggesting being vegan is in fact an option. And during the first lesson, one of the students asked if we drink milk, and when we stated we don't, he replied, "Cows exist to be milked, right?" Here the notion of cows as existing for humans is reproduced in the classroom, and some students couldn't imagine what to do with the milk if humans would not to drink it, or cows existing for something else than dairy production. However, the students' questions also opened up to approach cows differently when their teacher replied, "Do you know why the cow mother produces milk? It is for the calf. Her child should have it." Here cows, temporarily at least, enter the classroom as subjects by being constructed as mothers, possibly enabling to take an animal standpoint and address the dairy industry from the cow's perspective. The students further grappled with the reasons for us going vegan, acknowledging the conditions in the industry as a possible factor. One student applied this to the egg industry, saying, "Isn't egg, they are just coming out of them. It does not hurt them." The notion of some animals as production animals seems to be so prevailing. The egg production of hens, which is the result of intense breeding, is constructed as an imagined fixed natural order and not seen in the context of political, economic and social norms, which have had a huge impact on the bodies of hens. The idea egg production does not hurt the hens further correlates with the notion of the happy oppressed, which, according to Twine, helps avoid the discomforting affect risking to occur in those holding power in a relationship if the suffering is made visible. So if the narratives of vegans are embraced, discomfort regarding the animal industry and the consumption of animal-derived food risks taking its hold of some of the students in the classroom. And so, in the classroom, these narratives of veganism and animal rights encounter other narratives potentially easing this discomfort. The activist responded that she herself previously thought like this, but acknowledged it is not really what reality looks like, and that she will be talking about the Swedish animal industry the next lesson. During the second lesson, the animal rights activist focused on introducing the narratives of non-human animals exploited for food and told the students about the dairy industry, the egg industry and meat industry with pigs, using both photos and videos. Hence, these stories were told in a specific context and from a solidarity position. After watching a video clip of a cow being slaughtered, one of the students stated that he thought it was less brutal than in nature, reproducing the idea of the human as civilized in opposed to nature as brutal. In another statement, he also termed humans as relatively empathic and that might oppose animal abuse at slaughterhouses, although the actual killing was not included as a problem. On the one hand, this constructs humans as civilized, reproducing the human-non-human divide, and on the other hand, it opens up for the possibility to care. This student's reasoning was very much in line with deliberative argumentation commonly used within sustainability education, suggesting students often learn to approach the lives of other animals in detached ways, engaging in abstract reasoning. For some students, however, it seemed possible to consider the specific situation of individual animal beings and take an animal standpoint. For instance, when considering the forced impregnation and separation of cows and calves in the dairy industry, or imagining themselves in the position of hens in the egg production, stating it is like a person. This could open up for entangled empathy, but crucial for this to occur is action upon the situation of these beings exploited within food production. And the narratives of these beings are being introduced in a specific context, since it is framed in relation to animal rights activism and veganism as possible ways to act upon the situation of these animals. During this lesson, one of the students asked us, you do not support that one should murder cows, chickens and such, right? And the activist responded, no. Considering how animal rights activists perceive the killing of cows, chickens and other animals, here opened up to approach the often taken for granted killing of some animals for food as murdering them. And using the word murder instead of killing or slaughtering creates different connotations, and according to Stibbe, the language used about non-human animals impact humans' treatment of them. Killing other animals for food is, in the context of the school, often constructed as normal and so also familiar to those inhabiting these spaces and the meat norm. Hence, it becomes tricky to address, since, according to Ahmed, the ordinary is not experienced or felt at all. She relates the non-feeling of ordinariness to the feeling of comfort, which is something one does not really feel oneself, in that it is more an absence of discomfort. Hence, discomfort might be needed in order to being able to address and possibly also resist the killing of animals rendered familiar. Considering the slaughtering or murdering of non-human animals for food from the perspective of an animal rights activist, however, might open up to relate differently to the killing of so-called production animals. This instance suggests a vegan killjoy perspective, since the estrangement of vegans from the normalization of killing other animals for food seems to enable a consciousness of such practices, here constructing them as murder. And here are the references I've been using, and thank you so much for listening.
experience for the performers can be a transformative learning experience. So if such activities have the potential to change deeply ingrained beliefs, for example, about cows or other animals in general. And then a little bit more about what we did with storytelling and theater. An important aspect was the biography. So each participant was asked to write a biography of either a cow or a future human. And then they worked on it every session, and every session had a different theme. So one was about body, one was about relations, and one was about landscape. So, for example, they would receive from an expert all kinds of information about the bodies of current dairy cows and how they developed historically and what sort of medical conditions they are likely to have, and then they would add to their biography based on that. So the biographies are fictional but realistic. And we also visited a dairy farm, and then they looked at, what sort of cow is similar in personality to the cow that I'm representing. How would my cow fit into the group? The idea being that it's easier to represent an individual than an abstract category of cow. And then we also had conversations in the future. So this is where like one of the great grandchildren of the cows they created has a conversation with one of the future children, as if they are in the future that they envisioned for themselves. We also did it in the performance, and it was really, I thought, a very adorable part of the performance where a young girl and a cow talk about the friendship that they have and what they like about each other. So the quote, "One of my best friends is a cow," is from that part of the performance. And then we did a sort of a talk show about bodies where there are 4 cows are invited and ask questions about their bodies and what sort of conditions they have and how that affects them and what they would like differently. And then finally, we also did acting out a day in the life in the future that the cows in the future generation children desired. And the idea behind that was that if you act it out, then you run into all kinds of new questions that you don't encounter when you're just writing and talking. Yeah, and then after the performance, I interviewed all the participants, and I will now share some relevant findings from that. So I will always start with a quote from an interview and then explain a little bit more. Yeah, the first quote is, "Because I thought, yes, but I don't know everything about a cow, so I'm afraid that I will make a mistake," or something like that. Do I know what it's like to be a cow? And do I not have all these ideas now that are maybe not correct? Something like, do I not find everything incredibly sad, and am I not making a big deal out of nothing? And things like that. And at a certain point, I let that go. So what we noticed during especially the first and the second session, is that there was this fear of anthropomorphizing. And then not just getting it wrong, but then assuming that something is somehow harmful or unpleasant for a cow. So for example, they were like, well, if they remove the horns, are we sure that they don't like that? Or if they have to undergo a C-section, or if the calf is separated from the mother, are we sure that's something cows don't like? Or do we only think that because we as humans wouldn't like such a thing? But there was not really a fear of anthropodenial, which I thought was really interesting. So they were not afraid of assuming that something is fine for a cow when it really isn't, or assuming that a cow is unlike a human in some way when cows really aren't. But then we did a lot of research that has already been done into cow health and welfare, and then we found that all of our intuitions about what cows experience as stressful, negative, or painful were actually correct. And that really helped them to then assume that they can trust their intuition about how cows feel about things based also on their shared, mammalness and bodily experiences and mortality. So that was something that played in the beginning and was less and less towards the end. And then the interviews also showed that the project really helped in expanding imagination. So here are 2 quotes. "I thought it was cool that we dared to dream big. I really enjoyed being allowed to think unrealistically because, yeah, just dreaming selfishly as a cow, because that is what humans did as well." I think the theater-based approach of allowing any possibility was very interesting, and it also made me realize how limited my imagination has become over time. Yeah, so some people really jumped into the being allowed to imagine anything and not having to think, oh, well, the Dutch population of humans think this is a good policy measure. And to, think, oh, I'm going to stand up for my cow now and really say what she wants. And then other people really struggled with coming up with policy measures that were in line with the interests of the cow, but not necessarily realistic in the current Dutch political climate. But what really helped is that I kept giving explicit permission to let go of the idea of being realistic. And that really showed up in the policy measures that they come up with, because they are a lot more radical than the more standard welfare measures. Because, for example, in the end, they all consented on banning killing of cows, breeding of cows. They said there need to be mandatory cow language courses for children as well as politicians. We need to create like a big sanctuary to figure out what sort of lives cows would want. And I think before the start of the project, this is not something that these participants would have come up with. And they also said that they started thinking a lot more now about cows and what they would want, and not just about intensive livestock farming being a bad thing. But they started to think like, where would a cow want to live? Would a cow like to interact with humans or not? And how is this different for different cows? So it really opened up a lot of new questions for them. And then that also relates to seeing cows differently. So one participant said, I see cows everywhere now. And then another participant explained how already during the project, their perspective on cows was changing. This is about when we visited a cow farm. But I noticed very strongly now with myself that where perhaps before I started this project, that I then would enthusiastically have wanted to pet all the cows and touch them as much as possible and be close, etc. It was a bit like that now, but I was also overcome by emotions and sadness at the end. That I thought, oh right, they will never leave here. This is literally a prison. And that realization hit me hard, because if you spend a lot of time on it, or I had researched so much about how a cow lives and all the bad things at that point, and then you see all the cows who have that, and a very happy farmer who says everything will be fine and that they are doing a good job, and things like that, while you are literally seeing the cows there. The contrast between it is just big, and mostly, yes, I felt quite powerless. Yes, and this is something that a lot of the participants shared, is that they, after the project, saw cows more as individuals with individual wants and needs and all different from each other, instead of a more abstract category. And that they also became a lot more interested in cow language, for example. And especially also what's important for this experiment is that they saw cows as having a voice and being able to resist and being capable of democratic and political action, which is something most hadn't considered before yet. And then finally, for some, the project also led to behavior change, and the potential for this was a bit limited because many participants were already vegan or mostly vegan, for example. But one participant explained, but I notice now, for example, that just cheese, that I am then so aware that there is really a living cow behind that, who lives in such conditions that I suddenly find it very difficult to eat. So now I have lately, since the project finished, only bought vegan cheese. I don't feel comfortable with the idea anymore. Yes, which also makes sense to me. And others explain as well that while they were already sometimes bought oat milk, for example, instead of cow's milk, they were reminded again of the importance and paid more attention to that as well. Yeah, so those were sort of the most important findings. And then reflecting on the aim of the project, I think there's definitely potential of the representation of cows in a citizens' assembly, if you do it very carefully, like we did here, and not assume that humans know what cows want, but that you take a lot of time for humans to learn more and more about cows, and that you acknowledge that there's still a limitation of what we can know about the desires of cows at the moment because of the oppressive system that we live in, and that we need to work towards direct representation. And the project also created openness to the idea of direct representation. So I think that's an important step. And I think it would be very interesting to see if we can do more experiments with that. But I hope maybe you have also some ideas on that. So maybe we can share those later. But for now, this was my presentation. Thank you.
Yes, so we have now got Benjamin Hunt. So Ben is a lecturer in acting at the Northern School of Arts and Performance artist, focusing on animal narratives in theatre, advancing a practice-based PhD at De-mooo-cracy University for Performance and Animal Rights. The presentation today is titled Performing Animal Rights, Narratives of Trauma, Empathy and Activism in the UK.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, sure. Start with it.
Okay, all right.
Thank you very much. Hi, folks. I have such a great day today. It's an honor, truly honor to be here. So many fascinating avenues to go down. It's really, really incredible. I'm looking forward to tomorrow as well. So I'm here to discuss my research. I'm at the pinnacle of submitting my. Oh, sorry. Of submitting my thesis. Hence my relaxed, but very tired body. My research is on the intersection of performance, trauma, and activism within the context of animal rights in the UK. So I'm going to explore, today I'm exploring how performance can serve as a powerful medium for narrating the trauma experienced by non-human animals and fostering empathy and ethical considerations in audiences. My work aims to highlight the potential of performance to mobilize audiences towards activism and challenge anthropocentric views, ultimately contributing to the animal rights movement. That's me. Okay, so performance as an art form possesses a unique ability to engage audiences viscerally, evoking emotional responses that can lead to a deeper understanding of complex issues. In the context of animal rights, performance can narrate the often invisible trauma experienced by non-human animals, making their suffering palpable to human spectators. This process involves not only representing the physical suffering of animals, but also conveying the psychological and emotional dimensions of their experiences. By doing so, performance not only raises awareness, but also fosters empathy, urging audiences to reconsider their ethical responsibilities towards non-human animals. Through my practice-based research, I have sought to explore this intersection, utilizing performance to challenge dominant narratives and imagine alternative futures for human, non-human relations. So this is a snapshot of some of my theoretical frameworks and influences. So as it's an intersection, I looked at trauma theory, particular works of Susan Sontag and, saying this right, Slavoj Zizek. I examine how the representation of suffering impacts audiences. Sontag's insights into the role of images in making suffering real to the privilege and Zizek's exploration of the fetishist disavowal in witnessing violence provide a robust theoretical foundation for understanding the audience's emotional and psychological responses. And with that, I incorporate insights from animal studies and ethics, including Andrew Lindsay's work on non-human animal suffering and moral responsibility, further enriching the framework for analysing the effectiveness of performance in animal rights activism. My methodology is practice-based, integrating insights from performance studies, trauma theory, and animal studies, like I just mentioned. This approach involves the creation of performance projects, archival work, which I'll point to at the end of this presentation, and interviews with artists and animal rights activists. By combining theory and practice, I aimed to provide a comprehensive understanding of how narratives of trauma are constructed and communicated through performance. So this multimodal approach allowed for a dynamic interplay between theoretical exploration and practical application, ensuring the research remains grounded in real-world experiences and has tangible impacts on the animal rights movement, specifically in the UK. The use of ethnographic methods, including participatory observation and immersive experiences, which allows me to capture the nuanced dynamics of activism and performance, providing rich data for analysis. So my first key performance project was Box of Shadows, a piece based on bearing witness of slaughterhouse vigils. And that was my first exposure to animal rights activism. And this is the Northeast Animal Save Group. This performance utilised online performance, digital soundscapes, and visual media to create an immersive experience that evokes empathy and mobilises action. By placing the audience in a virtual space where they witness the realities of slaughterhouse practices, Box of Shadows challenged anthropocentric views and highlighted the trauma experienced by non-human animals. The performance disrupted the spectator's sense of normalcy and provoked critical reflection on their own complicity in animal suffering. And there I am in the Box of Shadows. So this was just at a time when lockdown was happening, so a lot of the stuff was moving online. So this is a live streamed event. So I embraced the use of digital media, including live stream performances, interactive soundscapes, and visual storytelling, which allowed for a more immersive experience. And audiences could navigate through different media elements, creating a personalized journey through the performance. This digital approach not only broadened the reach of the performance, but also allowed for continuous engagement even beyond the live event. And you can still go on this. So this is like 3 years ago, but I'll point you towards that at the end. So you can still access this performance, which is the power of digital media. My last performance project was Anti-Hunt, which investigated the trauma associated with fox hunting through endurance performance. This piece simulated the physical and emotional tolls of being hunted, employing ethnographic methods to capture the psychological dimensions of this experience. By reenacting the chase and the fear experienced by the hunted animal, Anti-Hunt sought to disrupt the idyllic narrative of the British countryside and draw attention to the brutal realities of fox hunting in the UK. The performance not only highlighted the trauma inflicted on non-human animals, specifically the fox, but also other non-human animals in the vicinity, but also critique the cultural and socio-political structures that perpetuate this practice. Bit of alliteration there. Was this a video? Oh, there we go. So, in Anti-Hunt, the endurance performance aspect involves participants physically engaging with the simulation, creating a visceral connection to the hunted animal's experience. The use of props, such as the mechanical horses, which you saw in the previous slide there. It's a participatory audience members there. That's me on the treadmill. So you could put on a red coat and get on the mechanical horse and shout out some things that a hunter would shout to me. The visceral nature of the performance allowed the audience to connect emotionally with the experience of non-human animals, making their suffering more relatable and urgent. Secondly, narratives of trauma, when effectively communicated through performance, mobilize the audience and inspired activism. By witnessing the trauma of non-human animals, spectators are often moved to reconsider their own actions and take steps towards more compassionate and ethical living. Well, that's the hope anyway. I've been jumping around there. So yeah, that's what I've just said, the key findings of the power of performance. So the implications of these findings for activism are significant. Performance as a form of activism can complement traditional methods of offering new ways to engage the public and promote animal rights. By humanizing non-human animals and making their suffering visible, performance can challenge deeply ingrained anthropocentric views and encourage audiences to adopt more compassionate behaviours. Moreover, the integration of performance into activism can help to bridge the gap between awareness and action, providing a platform for individuals to connect emotionally with a cause and feel motivated to contribute to the movement. The potential for these performance projects to be replicated or adapted in other contexts is vast, expanding their reach and influence. Interdisciplinary collaboration can foster new strategies for animal rights activism, blending performance art with technological advancements to create impactful experiences. Future research could explore the impact of performance on different demographics and cultural contexts, providing further insights into the effectiveness as an advocacy tool. This ongoing exploration is essential to continue evolving and refining performance-based activism to inspire meaningful change. In conclusion, my research demonstrates the transformative power of performance in the animal rights movement. By narrating trauma and fostering empathy, performance can play a crucial role in mobilizing audiences and challenging anthropocentric views, like I mentioned at the beginning. Through projects like Box of Shadows and Anti-Film, I've explored how performance can disrupt dominant narratives and inspire actors, contributing to broader discussions on the power of storytelling and cultural production in shaping attitudes towards non-human animals and the natural world. I hope that my work not only adds to the academic discourse, but also provides practical insights for activists seeking to engage and mobilize the public. As we move forward, it's essential to continue exploring innovative and creative approaches to activism that can effectively communicate the urgency of animal rights issues and inspire meaningful change. That's my email. Like I said, I'm at the end of so that's why I've gone personal, because I don't know how long I'm going to be on Democracy University's books for. That's my website, which has my performance pieces on that you can access. And this is the Performing Animal Rights digital archive where I've collected performance in the animal rights movement. It's not as up to date as I liked it to be, but it does go back to around 100 years of bits and bobs. I'm always looking for more things. So please, if there's anything missing or if you think of anything, please let me know. And if you click the podcast, there's and it's about 12 interviews released in a podcast series where I interview creative activists about their work in the movement, such as singer-songwriters, theatre makers, drag cows, and academics as well. Thank you very much.
So open up for questions from the chat or questions in the room. I think I saw a hand up. Yeah, do you want to get started?
That might be me, right?
Sorry.
Really interesting presentations. I have a quick question for Benjamin. A lot of what you were saying reminded me of the performances around disability. For example, people using wheelchairs or the experiences of dining as if you were blind that have been critiqued by disability activists more recently. And I was wondering whether in your thesis you think, and I know what you're doing is very, very different, but I'm wondering if you're thinking about the tensions that might be there between these different practices or not at all. Thank you.
Yeah. Do you mean between animal rights activists, or do you mean different elements of different social movements?
So animal rights performing, so the performances of animal rights to get people to see animal suffering, with the performances of disability to get people to feel disability.
Yeah, it's a fascinating area to look at, and it's definitely where this research lies, in the sense of applied theatre and how it can interweave between any sort of social movement or social issues, for sure. And it's a fascinating thing to explore further. It's definitely an avenue that I've been reading in with Beasts of Burden and books like that, which do look at the interchangeable link between those issues specifically. So I think there's definitely scope for that, and yes, there's also definitely tension for that as well. Absolutely, that's quite a complex conversation to have, which I find fascinating and really interesting to do. And I think performance is probably one of the best tools to have that conversation with, because you're exploring things in safe spaces, in creative spaces, and it's not a confrontational space; it's a creative and nurturing space. So it's all positive from my point of view.
I think I've got a question that applies to all three of you. I loved how these three presentations, they really speak of how you're trying to move, I don't know how to say it, but invite people to change their habits, to do something for a community of some sort, or a group, for performers, or a classroom. But I was wondering, yes, you're oriented towards other humans, but how was it for you? How transformative, let's say, this experience of being a teacher and a performer in the case of Ben and Anne? How has it been for you? How did anything change? Is it? I mean, that's out of curiosity. If you reflected on it, how transformative and probably not life changing, but for you, Jonna, maybe hearing those comments, they are from such a young audience. They're really, and you can actually feel that they're coming from the outside. They're not genuinely. I mean, what is genuine? But that they're really imbued with narratives they are circulating outside, and they're like liberal. So I was so struck by the comment, "Oh, cows are there for us to milk them." This is not a kid talking. I mean, it's just that it's the society like entering so abruptly in a classroom. And so these kinds of, if you had Anne and Ben, if you had any kind of, not traumatic, I don't want to, it's not a science session, but if there is anything that has changed or you, or yes, whatever.
Yeah, I can go. Well, I think it becomes very obvious how certain things for granted ideas of non-human animals are circulating in society and in schools in particular, and then being articulated in the room. But I think in a way that was not surprising. I expected to find that. But it's disappointing, and I think also in terms of, being an activist scholar and being there and arranging some of the lessons, then you're in between so many different roles. So yeah, you're an activist, but I'm there as a researcher, and in some sense I was there as a kind of health teacher in a way. And then to handle that role, and then being very grounded in the idea that I think it's the correct things to do, very critical pedagogy, to challenge these taken for granted assumptions. but to still maybe like when some students ask at one point, like, do you want to go vegan? And then like, oh, have I done something wrong to like put this message forward very clearly? Although I have thought about it and I don't think it's a problem and we should like discuss it and reflect upon it together. I like to see those like norms regarding education and the idea of the like the neutral teacher, although I have a very critical perspective on it from the start, still getting that instance feeling and then like thinking about it and then reframing how I think and then considering how is this could this pedagogy be introduced from the perspective of someone that would not maybe do it from the perspective of a vegan teacher in a sense. How would that happen with a teacher that is not in solidarity with other animals? When we have those very strong norms, how would that work? Is there more risk to it than possibilities to reproduce them and exploitative human-animal relations? Or, yeah, are there no openings? So I think that was one of the things that surprised me, how I reacted to some of the comments there. Yeah.
Yeah, Richard. Thanks. Another great session. Both was just more answers to
the question.
yes.
Anna, have you got a response?
Yeah, I think for me it was mostly well, when it comes to be a more sort of difficult experience was when we visited the farm with the dairy cows. That was for me I mean, I do it sometimes for work. It's always a very emotionally difficult experience, but it was in a way nice to share that with a group of people who were by then also very concerned for the cows there. And I think it was an important sort of collective experience for us as a group to really feel for whom we are doing this. And I think the project as a whole also was quite hopeful. I mean, of course, this was a group of people already concerned about other animals, but they were also very easily on board with the ideas of animals as political actors, which I had not expected. And they also seemed to be quite relieved when they were allowed to let go of this fear of anthropomorphizing that I think is a lot of times sort of unspokenly present in society. And I think if we can help to let that go in different spaces, that will also go a step towards listening to other animals. So I think it made me see a lot of small steps that we can take. So also having like one representative for another animal in a real citizens assembly, for example, or focusing on showing a different future instead of just saying what needs to be different, what's wrong with what's going on now, that don't need like a full systems change within one day, but that can be steps towards that we can already be working on now. So I think that for me was quite hopeful, actually.
Yes, I could definitely mirror that. There's definitely hope there. It opened up more ideas about strategy for activists, and for me personally, absolutely, it was when my research began. It was very much how do we get the message out as effectively as possible through performance. That was the general gist of my research, but it very much quite quickly came 50-50 with that as one of the main ones. But the second one was how can art mobilize activists and be a type of therapy or kind of process for activists to not burn out or to not use it in a violent way. So using creative performance, creative arts, such as songs, such as theatre. And for me as a performance artist, going through the second-hand trauma I witnessed a fox being hunted as an activist, that I could go through that on a performance for 6 hours on a treadmill and feel those feelings still and embody those interspecies kind of embodiment, really got me through some of those really dark thoughts, which are still there, but in a different way now. They've been kind of, not to trivialize it, but kind of laundried, ironed a bit. So they're kind of a bit more smoother and I can kind of more tangible. So definitely it's changed me as a person. And I think because of that, it's made me more aware of how effective performance can be beyond impacting audiences.
Yeah, my couple of questions which involve all three of you. Another great session. Question for Ben and Anne would be, have you situated your work within critical animal pedagogy to an extent? And if not, after listening to Jonna, do you think that would be that work would be useful for you both? And then the question for Jonna would be, like, pretty obvious really. Do you see citizens' assemblies and performance art as really useful methodologies for critical animal pedagogy?
Yeah, I can definitely start with that. Absolutely. I was just telling Jonna about my third project, which I didn't manage to do because, as we know, PhDs become massive monsters. Was pedagogical. So I used to be a teacher, an English teacher in a secondary school, and the third one was take a shadow puppet show to a school and doing a puppet workshop and getting to process trauma through performance and education. And that's still in the pipeline. I've got funding for it. It's in a little pot somewhere. So that's definitely a way forward. And just speaking before, I think that can definitely take a lot from what Jonna said for sure. Because there's a real, when I was a teacher, the most productive as an activist I was as a teacher, an English teacher, not as someone who went in just bringing up things like, right, kids, let's do Animal Farm, or something like that, just to get some ideas in there. Let's do Worship Down, let's do Black Beauty, and getting some ideas in there. What do you think about speciesism? And kind of, and they were always interested and they were curious, and that was a really fruitful time for me. So absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've also been reading about critical pedagogy, and I think the aims that Jonna mentioned really align, like changing perspectives on non-human animals and the dualist thinking, moving that away from that. And I've also given like a guest lecture on this, on democracy for university students, where we did similar activities, so visiting a cow farm, and then they had to write a story that shows the micro as well as macro agency of cows, of a specific cow in their story. So that's really something that was appealing to do to the students. So I think definitely it's a sort of quite accessible way also, because you're not going in there saying, oh, this is all wrong, but rather saying, oh, get to know a cow, see a cow that appeals to you, and then try to find out things about this cow and form a sort of relationship with it, spark your curiosity, and then we'll see from there. So I think this is a sort of easy entry point to seeing cow as someone else that you could be in a relationship with, rather than your future food, for example.
Yeah, I think for me it's been very inspiring to be in this panel here and talk, and to have like more ideas of what we talk about to try, and also for me it also shows that like the strength in coming together and maybe possibly collaborating in the future, because I think they have so many different like experiences and ideas, and coming together, I think it's very interesting to see what one could do, or just getting inspired by each other. And some of the work that I did was also like that they also could imagine themselves in the position of the animals, and at least one student went vegan, so that's great. So, but I think it's like for different people, different like approaches would work. So I think that's why it's so important with a multitude of strategies and exploring different ways of approaching a critical perspective on human animal relations. I'm very thankful.
I want to say well done to everyone. They were all fantastic, and a special shout out to Coco for the cat. Representing. I just felt really inspired by everything that you were saying. So I was just wondering kind of about the potential of VR, virtual reality for all of the presentations. I felt like perhaps, you know, having something where you feel that you are the cow that's about to be milked and you're having a cartoon, and in the other context, like sort of other kind of you know, going to the slaughterhouse as well that Ben was talking about. And it also struck me of this kind of idea of VR for migrants as well. So when thinking from a human perspective, how they're often vilified or made out to be, you know, they're all taking our jobs and things like that. That sense of if we had a VR where we felt that we were the migrants and kind of taking on what Ben was saying about feeling like the fox and just taking it another step forward, I just thought that could be a really interesting educational tool as well. But anyway, I don't know if you've got time to really discuss it because I don't want to feed into the next thing. But
well,
yeah,
there is VR. There is VR out there. We were just talking about that as well, weren't we?
Yeah,
And Animal Equality, yeah, they do a thing called iAnimal, or they kind of half stopped, but hoping to get that back up. And that's very much, you're either a chicken, I think it's a dairy cow and a pig, yeah. And it's 360, and they got permissions to go into all these different. It was remarkable how they got to do it, but they did. And I think there's definitely more scope for that, for sure. I think there's ethical considerations, though. I wrote a bit in my chapter about that because I used to volunteer doing that. And I think there's a thing of consent that we kind of missed because we're plopping them into like a hellscape. It's not you are a human watching some footage. You are the animal. I think there's some ethical considerations to cross there because I remember at the time when people were crying, taking off the headsets, going, actually, like, let's just calm down here. Why there needs to be some sort of healthier route there, and maybe it's more of a brief or something like that. I think there needs to be, because it's so potent, such a potent tool VR. So yeah, but it's a fascinating tool if it's done right, for sure.
I've been using that the animal qualities in schools, not in this project, but before as an animal rights activist. But I think also in terms of like creating very strong emotions in a classroom, it's this like balance of what is possible to be handled in this context of like formal education. In my case, what kind of environment is it to share your emotions? I think it's good to like work with emotions, but we should be a bit like maybe to just have the idea that it's maybe not a safe space in this classroom. We don't know what's going on in their relationship between the students and so on. So it's like this balance maybe, and I think it's more so about thinking what kind of space is this and what can we do here and not have this idea that this is a safe space to sit and talk about our feelings. It might be for some students in some contexts, but not maybe in all classes. But definitely an interesting and I think powerful and prominent tool. Yes.
Well, start there. I also have loads of questions I could ask. Animal master. So we're now going to have a short video presentation from Tenderfoot Theatre, who have come to join us. So if you welcome them up, they can maybe give a brief summary of what they're going to kind of just kind of say hi, and then we can jump. Yeah.
Hi, is there a good place for us to find the table over there? Right. Yes. You think that's better? Right, okay. Like, cool. You have to so we are two parts of Tenderfoot Theatre, CIC. So we're a sustainable arts collective. So we primarily work in theatre. In the past, we've also done digital projects. We've done audio plays and short films and things like that. And today, basically, we're going to share two pieces of work with you. The first is a recording we did, and I'm glad we recorded it because it's really threatening to rain. We were going to take you outside and go and perform it properly, but it looks like the weather might not hold. So we did a recording of one of our spoken word performances called Rooted, which is the journey of an old man who has escaped his nursing home to return to nature and reflects on all of the milestones in his life where nature has been a character with him. And then we also have a short extract from our new touring production, which I will talk about when we get to that point. But for now, If we do you have
On this way.
Oh, lovely.
So great. That's what I say for like another 7 seconds.
So Rooted was written by one of our in-house writers, Kate Elizabeth Carey, and it was originally written as a series of haikus that she wrote through the pandemic. So while her experience of lockdown was living in Seaforth in Liverpool without access to a garden. So a lot of her time during lockdown was spent indoors longing for the outside, as it was for many people. And so she wrote this series of haikus that she then expanded on and developed to create Rooted. And then we worked with our director, Dan Vernon, and the first time this was performed, which was the first time? It's done quite a few, hasn't it?
Yeah, it was for Beacon.
Yes,
Beacon.
so it's Beacon Country Park, so their green fair was the first time that this debuted, but since then it's been in lots of different green spaces all across Lancashire, which has been lovely.
Over to Wavertree. That was fun.
Yeah, it's done Wavertree, it's been here in Ormskirk, it's been sort of all over the shop. But yeah, so there it is, and we will come out of the way and we will come back in a bit. Magnolia.
And I will be reading for Crystal.
Okay, so evening post-show. Magnolia is in the bath, a towel wrapped around her head. Christoph is grooming at the mirror. They both have a glass of wine and are quite tipsy. It's tricky.
Come on.
I'm thinking.
Good Lord, how many have you had?
Right, no, I've got it. Worst shag was probably Gordon Ramsay.
No, I'd be well into a bit of Gordon.
Yeah, he'd be well into a bit of you too, plum sauce and all.
Yes, chef.
Best. Oh, you know who's filth?
I'll say anyone but Attenborough.
God no, David's a gentleman. Mind you, in his hate.
Shut up, shut up, shut up.
Andy Burnham. Now that is a man who's not afraid to get his hands dirty.
When did you and Andy burn up?
Labour and Cooperative Conference of 08. Our eyes met across the room and what followed was nothing short of pornographic. It was only after, lying there in the damp, that he confessed he was leaving politics to go into haberdashery. I said to him, Andrew, a man with your prowess should be running for Mayor of Manchester. And the rest is history.
Thank God you were there.
I know. Go on, your turn.
I had a horned screamer once, and a rough-faced shag in the same night, yeah.
Bloody hell, pass me that wine. Does Annie know about your escapade?
Northern shovelers are non-monogamous.
You're not a northern shoveler.
No, but she definitely is. It's cool, we communicate, mostly through carrier pigeon.
Any word from the ex?
Not really. You know how great tits are.
I do.
Yes, you do. Scooch over.
Bring the legs into the back. I'm gonna miss you. Feels like when you just got here.
You got the good wine.
All this goes so fast and then you're gone again.
You didn't have to get the good wine.
Still. Home must be beautiful this time of year.
I'm just grateful for wine. Everyone assumes I'm a beer person.
What time's your flight?
I don't know.
You don't know.
Like, I can't hack bread. What makes you think I want a pint of yeast?
Migration, of course you know.
No, I don't know. Whereas wine, it's got the grapiness.
Like, it's not
Maggie,
your family. Don't they all go together?
will you just stop asking?
Why?
Because I'm not going, okay? I can't go.
What you on about?
I'll go home. Last year, just before winter, the same as always, we were getting ready to make the flight. My father keeps saying it's a little too warm to leave, that we're better off staying put for a little while longer. And his dad pipes up with the whole, I've left for the winter on this day every year of my life. I won't stop now for nobody. You know how grandparents are. All set in their ways. We make the trip, we winter here. Everything seems just how it's always been, if a little warmer than usual. And then spring rocks round, as it always does, and we begin that long flight home again, only this time everything had changed. Suddenly there were buildings and structures that had never been there before, right on course, right where we're supposed to fly. So we have to go around, find a way through. We get split up, and Grandpa's eyesight isn't what it used to be. So he's relying on the magnetism as we slalom between high rises, desperately looking for open air. And I'm calling to him, keeping him close, guiding him through, and finally, we see a break in the flight path. I'm through, and Grandpa's through, the whole family like some kind of miracle, except I can't see my mother. I look back, and there she is, hanging from the power lines, suspended in midair, her neck snapped backwards like she'd been crushed with a fist. A mangle of feathers. Was dead. We tried to free her body from the wires, but it was no use. We had to leave her behind.
Stop.
Somehow we flew the last 1,000 miles back to the breeding ground. All I could think about the whole flight was home. Home, home, counting down the miles, just get me home. As long as I've been alive, as long as my grandparents and their great-grandparents have been alive, the wetlands have been home. Touchdown on the water, usually there's so much noise. A proper family reunion, a choir of squawks and landings, but this time it's quiet. I go back to our nesting spot, and there's a sign. Planning permission. And an eviction notice. Can't fly home, Mags, because there's no home to fly back to.
Phoebe, where's your family?
Around, I hope. We had to scatter. It was hard to keep everyone together with such little to go around, but they know where I spend my winters. I keep an eye out for them in the crowd.
Why didn't you say anything?
Who was I going to tell? You're the only ones who hear me, and you've had your hands full.
Must be so lonely. Come here. Bed down here for as long as you need. We've got plenty to go around. You are home. This is your home.
It's a matter of time, Mags.
And as long as I have the strength to stand, this is your home. And I'll keep getting the good wine. Are you playing footsie with me?
I'm not touching you.
What was that?
Ah, a fish. It's a fish, you stupid bitch.
That is a little extract from yeah, giving you that. But yes, thank you. So that show's currently in production. If you want to know what happens to Krista, spoilers, he does end up having a bit of a happier ending. So we do explore how he might be able to reconnect with his family. And yeah, kind of goes on to end up being the hero of the show in a way.
Yeah.
In a very murder most foul way.
Foul.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so thank you. And if anyone's got any questions or anything, we're here to take them. But I appreciate it. So about time you've been sat here all day. So yeah, thank you very much. Does anyone have any
No, lovely stuff.
Thank you.
Go and read all of these. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Works, but it's not working. There was a train derailment this morning, which meant that Self and Jonna, who were traveling down from Magnus, were a little bit late, and I was supposed to say something at the beginning of today, mostly to say, I think some of it might have been said in my absence, that Centre for Human Animal Studies, CFAS, was formed 10 years ago, 2014. So this is our 10th anniversary year, and this amazing event constitutes perhaps the first celebratory event of our 10-year anniversary. And one of the really rewarding things about being a co-director of CFAS alongside Professor Claire Parkinson is that we've seen our postgraduate community emerge and grow. And this is the second research symposium that they have put on. And it's just really satisfying for us to see that happen. Thank you once again for all your work that you put into it. And another satisfying thing is that in recent years, we've also had visiting PhD students come from other parts of the world, from Brazil, from Spain, Sweden, Jonna being our most recent visitor. And some of our other previous visitors were Olympia, for example, earlier on today. She was a visitor with us last year. And yeah, if you don't know too much about this, then this is our website. And quite proud of the fact that we were one of the first, and still probably, you know, actually we wish there were more now, but one of the few academic research centres which is examining a broad range of issues around human-animal relations, and especially the fact that we're challenging anthropocentric thinking and approaches and recognising the interests of animals in our very much in our ethos. So yeah, to explore our history of our publications, our events, regular blog, and projects that we've been involved with, and we have members from across the different faculties of the university, and yeah, we're just sort of doing things to try and grow further, you know, trying to bring in research money and all that kind of things, try to expand further in the future if we can. What else was I going to say? Yeah, thank you for attending, and yeah, there's a good chance actually we'll have more funded PhD opportunities in the future, indeed probably towards the end of this year. So if you know anybody who is perhaps doing a master's at the moment and might want to do a PhD soon, and they can bear us in mind if they like. And yeah, just thank you, and once again, I've really enjoyed today, and can't be here tomorrow in person, but yeah, I already know that you've got a great event, so thanks very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.